Welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight, September 22nd, for the Berkeley School Board Candidate Forum. My name is Adina Ishii of the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. The League of Women Voters is a non-partisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We do not support or oppose candidates or parties. The advocacy arm of the League may take positions on issues such as ballot measures. However, this forum is presented by the Voter Services and Education arm of the League, which does not take positions or advocate for them. I'd like to remind everyone that the candidates have all agreed to participate under ground rules set for this forum. These forum ground rules are posted in Eventbrite. Candidates are not permitted to display campaign buttons, t-shirts, signs, Zoom backgrounds, etc., in order to maintain neutrality. We are recording tonight's forum, and the session will be available on our website, lwvbae.org, through votersedge.org/CA, with links on our social media accounts at LWVBAE, and that's on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. There are 6 candidates running for Berkeley School Board. They are Laura Babitt, Jose Luis Bedoya, Norma JF Harrison, Esfandiar Imani, Mike Chang, and Anna Vasudeo. On your ballot, you will be able to choose 2 candidates out of the 6. Now let's go over a few ground rules. Each candidate has 2 minutes for opening remarks. The order was determined by drawing lots. The timekeeper will signal candidates with a green colored window, which will count down the seconds from 2 minutes to 15 seconds to go when it will turn yellow, and then red when the full 2 minutes is up. As people signed up via Eventbrite, they submitted written questions. If you have additional questions, you may type them in by clicking the Q&A icon. Our volunteers will take the questions and pass them to the moderator. All questions will be screened to avoid duplication and personal attacks. The order of answering the questions will be alternated, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Again, the timekeeper will signal candidates. There will be no separate rebuttals. However, the candidates may choose to use some or all of their 1 minute to rebut the response given by another candidate. Following the questions, each candidate shall have 1 minute for a closing statement. Now let's begin our Berkeley School Board Candidate Forum. We had selected Laura as being our first, but unfortunately, Laura is not with us yet. We're hoping that she will join us soon. After Laura is Norma. So Norma, if you can please start us off with your 2 minute opening. Sorry, Norma, you'll need to unmute yourself. And I think our timer is being reset.
Okay. I'm running again. I think this is the 5th time because the problems remain the same in this social structure that we live in. I am not here to talk about repairing school because school is already doing what it's supposed to do, which is serve up a bunch of people to keep the owners rich. No more than I would not attempt to repair capitalism either. Capitalism is already fixed, as you know. A lot of what I say is going to be difficult for people to take in. They're not prepared to hear what I have to say or place it in a framework where it makes sense. So I'm up on Voter's Edge, and part of that is my ID. You can call me or email me or not talk to me if you don't want to. I've been involved with what's called educational activities as all kinds of people, as a student, as a parent, as a authorized school teacher, and other arrangements which have promoted various understandings. I'm going to be reading from statements I've made, and I'm not going to be answering questions per se. So the various understandings that I've gotten from doing these many activities for many, many years, I'm very old, have enlightened me. I've been overcome with the recognition that it is school itself that is the problem. The institution requires the overall eradication of the person who attends and of their family and community. Both are obligated to become an other in order to fit the requirements school has, in order to meet, that's it.
All right. It looks like our timer visually was not working at the moment, but the timing should be correct. The next person is
I
Anna.
saw it.
Go ahead, Anna.
Great. Hi. Well, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. My name is Anna Vasudeo, and I'm a candidate for Berkeley School Board. I'm a proud mother of 2 boys enrolled in Berkeley Public Schools and an equity PTA leader. I'm a first-generation college graduate who grew up in a Nicaraguan immigrant family. I was able to thrive in schools because of the support of community-based organizations. I know firsthand that all our children can reach their full potential with the right support systems in place, just like I did. As an active Berkeley parent, I have fought for our students by advocating alongside the Berkeley Federation of Teachers to ensure that our schools are better funded, by partnering with Walk Bike Berkeley to pass Vision Zero to keep our children safe on their way to and from school, and by serving as the Vice President of Equity and Inclusion on the Berkeley PTA Council to give families of color more of a voice in the decision-making processes of our schools. As a professional Safe Routes to School leader, I currently oversee a district-wide program to ensure that 55,000 children can get to school safely. I bring practical government experience and strong fiscal management skills to this position. As a member of the school board, I will continue to fight to close the opportunity gap for our most vulnerable students. I will fight so that our educators can make a living wage. My mom was an educator, so this is very personal to me. And I will advocate for safe, affordable, and sustainable transportation for our students. I'm the only candidate endorsed by the entire current Berkeley School Board, and also have the endorsement of the Berkeley Federation of Teachers, Senator Nancy Skinner, Mayor Jesse Arreguin, the supermajority of City Council, and numerous Democratic clubs, including the Alameda County Democratic Party, the Berkeley Democratic Club, Wellstone Democratic Renewal Club, East Bay Young Democrats, and many others. Please visit my website at annavasudev.org to learn more about my campaign. Mil gracias.
Thank you. Next, we have Esfandiar.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for your time and the opportunity. I'm Esfandiar Imani. I'm first generation immigrant. Came here when I was 17. My parents and siblings were left behind because of revolution and war in my country. I worked hard and supported myself through college years. I did my undergrad and graduate studies right here at Cal. And this is where I met my wife, and we settled down for the past 30 years. I love this city for its diversity and progressiveness. My wife and I are both products of public schools. We believe in public education. So when the time came, we had no hesitation to enroll our 3 daughters in Berkeley public schools, from kindergarten all the way through high school. Over the past 20 years, I have been very much involved hands-on in numerous aspects of Berkeley schools. I was elected on BSEP committee, and I was also a member of BUSD Planning and Oversight Committee. Separately, I have led and worked with a group of parents and scholars with the California State Board of Education to change K-12 public school framework, which was adopted in July 2016. While my family and I had a positive experience with Berkeley schools, we had also witnessed firsthand serious issues in the system. Sexual harassment and abuses, particularly in Berkeley High School, achievement gaps, and racial inequality throughout the system. If elected, I will work with my colleagues to address these issues. Professionally, I have led projects worth several hundred millions of dollars, dealing with budgeting, negotiations, and building alliances among various stakeholders. With my professional expertise in risk management, I will bring pragmatic solutions and experience dealing with root cause of issues, and come up with early preventive measures which would cost a lot less than trying to deal with symptoms in late stages. Thank you very much for your time again. Hope I have your vote and support. And please visit my website, Imani for School Board at .org. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Jose.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for organizing this event, and thank each one of you out there for taking the time to be part of this event and to listen to us. Why I'm running? COVID-19 exposed a lot of failures in our current educational system inequity, disparate experiences, and our community's tacit acceptance of those failures. Vision 2020 set out the goal of narrowing the achievement gap between racial groups, but large gaps remain in all key metrics. This is not acceptable. As an example, according to the 2018 BUSD 2020 vision data, in terms of 8th grade math proficiency, 80% of white students scored proficient, roughly 50% of Latinx students, and only 20% of our Black students. Again, unacceptable. There's data to suggest that if you're well-to-do in Berkeley, your educational experience is much different than others. That is also unacceptable. BUSD is a public entity, and everyone who lives here pays taxes, yet there's no public outreach for that lack of educational achievement. Yet some students have, so a little bit about me and why I'm doing this. I'm an immigrant to the States as well. I came here when I was 4. My parents finished only elementary school. They sacrificed everything to give me a better life. I'm a public school advocate. My children are in public school. I have batted the cycle from high school to middle school to elementary. Now I have one in college. I have experience working in Fortune 500 companies. I'm managing large departments and considerable budgets in complex products and services. I have also experience in multiple sectors such as nonprofit sectors, including places like Habitat for Humanity. Locally, I've been part of BSEP and Disaster and Fire Commission. So I'd like to put myself out there as an outsider to go in and serve the community as best I can. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Mike?
Hi, thank you for listening. I am a first-generation immigrant from an immigrant family, first-generation American. I have 3 kids in the district. My wife and I have been active on the PTA in the district for 10 years. We have 5 more years to go. I served as a vice president on the PTA executive board at Berkeley Arts Magnet. I'm also a government attorney, education law civil rights attorney at the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. I'm a lecturer at Cal's Ethnic Studies and Legal Studies Department with 25 years of teaching experience. I'm also a commissioner on the Police Review Commission. With my education lawyer experience at the U.S. Department of Education, my priorities are to secure equity-based district-wide restorative justice policies to resolve disparities for Black and Latinx students, and also to address sex harassment procedural issues, create a housing trust for teachers and classified staff, and advocate for full funding for public schools, and secure ethnic studies as a critical equity-based language for the 2020s. As a commissioner on the Police Review Commission, I focus on reducing race disparities, such as my committee work on the use of force to draft a policy based upon the sanctity of life. As an ethnic studies teacher, I train young minds to be empathetic to each other and understand experiences through an equity-based anti-discrimination lens. I've been endorsed by the mayor, the vice mayor, council member Susan Wengraf, outgoing board members, the chair of the Police Review Commission, USD teachers and administrators, the American Federation of Teachers, of which I'm a member, and also the American Federation of Government Employees, which I'm also an active member of. Thank you for your time, and please look me up on runwithmikechang.com, and please feel free to email or call me with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Laura has joined us. Laura? Oh, Laura, you are on mute.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity to be with you this evening. Yes, my name is Laura Babitt, and I am the proud parent of 3 daughters who have attended or still attend Berkeley schools. My youngest just started the 5th grade. I was raised by educators who modeled creating change in our schools and city. This is why when I learned of the huge opportunity gap in Berkeley schools, I felt the call to action and responded. Over the last 10 years, I have spent at least 40 volunteer hours a month working on or chairing all of our major district committees, from our school site PTAs, school site councils, the BSEP Parcel Tax and Oversight Committee, our Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee, as well as the Parent Advisory Committee. So on every level, I've been deeply involved. And through this activism, I have helped to implement support versus discipline, social emotional counselors, family engagement specialists, special special education support or reform, English language learner support, the hiring and retention of teachers of color, and I've stopped budget cuts for educators. However, in response to COVID-19, I realized that leading from the sidelines was not going to be enough. We need a finance expert on our board to help navigate the financial pressures the impending recession will bring. For the last 25 years, I've led million to billion-dollar entities through 2 recessions by making data-driven decisions and creating efficiencies which reduce cost and save jobs. Through the lens of equity, I am committed to 1, create accountability structures so that our programs and special education services are implemented effectively, provide outcome-oriented budgeting, cut red tape, build collaborative, welcoming school environments, and in response to the Jacob Blake shooting in front of his children, I will add a focus for our schools to embrace trauma-informed care and instruction. In closing, after years of constituents asking me to run for the school board, the time is now. I am endorsed by the Berkeley Federation of Teachers, the Alameda County Democratic Club, East Bay Young Democratic Club, Wellstone Democratic Club, John George Democratic Club, Latinos Unidos de Berkeley, current and former school board directors, a supermajority of the city council. I'm sorry, is my time up?
Laura, you're out of time.
Okay, thank you. And please check the others at laurababitt.com.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now it's time for the candidates to answer your questions. And our first question will go to Anna. So the question is, how would you address the challenges of holding art and science classes virtually, especially when some students are responsible for providing their own supplies?
Hi, that's a great question. This is an equity issue. And I think, you know, we're 7 months into this pandemic, and as the only candidate here who is working on COVID response for our schools professionally, I can tell you that we have dropped the ball on the equity front. When it comes to providing arts and science, I think, you know, we need to make sure that we have a better distribution process for our students, an equitable distribution process of materials for our students. I have fought with the district to make sure that, for example, we had like a car-only pickup policy, and I have pushed back on the district. And now, thankfully, the Department of Public Health is supporting that students and families who are transit dependent can go and pick up materials by walking and with other modes of transportation, right? I think we need to be able to create hubs for students like other cities have done, like San Francisco has done through the Community Learning Hub programs, so that students that need these resources can go to neighborhood sites, community-based organizations to access resources and use those spaces.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Thanks, yes. I mean, sure, the problem right now is very unprecedented, but just like many other crises, they can be dealt much better, right? This, again, if you have preventive measures early on, the costs are a lot lower, both in terms of human lives and in terms of resources that you need later on. This is definitely, like Anna said, it's an equity issue. This is an issue that was before pandemic, and it's kind of shows its ugly face now, even more so. So instead of being reactive, and my approach is always think of what are the key contributors to these issues and how we can prevent them at the earliest stage.
Thank you. Jose?
Thanks for the question from one of the folks who are participating. I actually disagree a little bit. I think this is a management issue. Distribution of resources, distribution of things is key to any organization, whether it be a company, a business, a nonprofit, or what have you. So I think that it's a management failure. There are ways you can mitigate it. I like the idea of the the Ed Hub, for example, distributes parts and logistics for, parts for, and provides a logistics center for different activities. So there are ways to mitigate it. I think we're all being impacted for sure. And I think that it's going to be the folks that are most impacted are, people of color, let's be honest. But there, again, by putting out the effort, having better management processes to actually deliver these things on time or deliver to folks as another alternative, other than just us going to them, they should come to us as the district.
Thank you. Mike?
Yes, thank you. I think this is an access issue, and it is a management issue as well. As, with regard to procedures and processes, the district can ensure that students of need who need the supplies have access to them. I know that my son, being in middle school, had access to certain art materials, but a hub in particular to ensure centralization of provision of necessary supplies for both science and art is important to provide an equitable base for all students to access their education. As an education law attorney, I have direct jurisdiction over these type of circumstances. And I've been working on these issues for almost 15 years as a federal government attorney in education. So these are exactly the type of issues that are important to have proper systems in place. And I know that lots of schools are working very hard on them, but centralization through the district is important under a broader equity model, and a hub, it would be a good way to centralize and provide structure to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, you're next. I just want to make sure you can see the timer because I know you didn't get to run over it with you. I apologize. Okay, it's your turn for the question.
All right, thank you so much for this question. This is part of why I made sure that we had family engagement specialists at every elementary school, at high school, and we've now expanded it to middle school, because these people do identify and know exactly who our families are that need these additional resources. They connect with them daily, and we make sure that they get them. I've also been working with the Berkeley Public Schools Funds. I'm grateful to be endorsed by Mary Freeman, who's one of the founders, and they are the primary people who have put together the Ed Hub that is already in place in Berkeley schools, in which we can make sure that kids can not only pick up art supplies, school supplies, but they can also pick up library books and many other resources. Finally, at my school, our PTA is organized for parents who can't come and pick them up during our distribution days, that we deliver it to them. So this is a practical solution in which no child should be left behind, because we have what we need and we're trying to make sure that they diligently receive those supplies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Norma? Oh, Norma, you're muted.
Muted myself. Yeah, I left off reading the statement that I have posted, as I said, on Voters Edge, that the League of Women Voters kindly supplies for us. I've told you both that people are obligated to become an other in order to fit the requirements that school has in order to meet the demands of this social system. This social system, as you know, is a for-profit system, capitalist, and it's brutal, it's criminal. It provides, through the schools and other structures, submission to a de facto slavery system that provides profit, wealth, and power to the few who own it. I got this, some of this from somebody named Casey Gerald, who was being interviewed by Van Jones, that idea of having to leave part of yourself behind in order to fit in.
Norma, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next question starts with Esfandiar, and the question is, in 2016, Measure Y1 passed in Berkeley, allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote for school board. This was never implemented. Do you support 16 and 17-year-olds voting for school board? And if so, what will you do to support this effort?
Yes, definitely I support it. I believe, my daughter, the youngest one, just graduated this year, and she has totally educated me on what's going on in the high school. And of course, we were involved from day one, from kindergarten all the way through high school. But the issues, especially in the high schools, get more serious, as most of you and my colleagues here know. And so they are definitely more close to issues, social issues, and their opinion is very valued. And I would definitely to do whatever it takes to support that measure and to make them, or to have them be able to vote when they are 17 or 16. And I understand San Francisco is following the suit, or following the same trend. So I definitely support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose?
Thank you. That's a great question. My answer is definitely yes. I think that 16 and 17-year-olds are definitely, sorry, the Zoom, travails of being on Zoom, but 16 and 17-year-olds are adults in a lot of ways, in other places in the world. But more than anything, I believe in the stakeholder model. The stakeholder model basically says that, people of all ilks, people of all that are touched by our system, in this case, the educational system, need to have a seat at the table. So this includes, juniors and seniors who are, have very much a stake in what's happening, and teachers, as well as unions. So I learned this part of, in part of the industry I used to work with, I used to work in automotive. There we have very strong unions, and so you have to have all these kind of folks there to have a better outcome and to have better product and to have better services. Without bringing everybody into the system, it's not going to work. We're going to leave people behind. And I think that, having that youth perspective, having the actual user perspective would be extraordinary step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Yes, thank you. I've met with the Berkeley High School Vote 16 crew, and I feel this is a really important issue. Voter suppression is on the front of our minds during this election season. That measure was passed, and I think it behooves the City Council to put it forward to set a timetable so that 16-year-olds who are most impacted and aware and informed about the runnings of schools will be able to vote for their school board members. In general, I think it's a matter of access, and 16-year-olds are very well suited in order to have knowledge about the best school board member issues and the various concerns that some of which we may not be aware of as adults as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
Thank you for that question. Of course, I support it. I also worked with former school board director Josh Daniels in the passing of that measure, working closely with our students at that time. And I've still been working closely with the students at Berkeley High School now who would like to vote. At my next outdoor event, I plan on making sure that they have a table where they can sign people up to vote, where they can do their own mock votes. So I've been mentoring and working with them. And it's not just a city council issue. As school board directors, we are the advocates for our constituents. And so we need to be taking ownership to make sure that the policies and procedures that need to be put in place by Alameda County take hold. And so that by at least the next election, they will be able to vote in the next couple of years. There's some basic practical solutions to that, which has been outlined in the school board meeting, and we can make sure that that happens. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Norma?
All people should be able to vote as soon as they have an interest in what's going on. The idea is that all people should be part of our system, should be contributing to it, should be involved in it. Exclusion by age segregation is not a good value for this society to hold. By the way, education, it has been commodified. It is not, though, health care or housing. It's something that happens for us all our lives, but it becomes dismissed into having to be authenticated, degreed in order to get a job, which is a bad purpose for having to learn and think until you're involved in trying to have a skill, a particular skill that makes a contribution to society. Otherwise.
Thank you, Norma. For our next question, we are going to start with Jose. And I just want to remind, I'm so sorry, Anna, I apologize. I've gone there. Yes, please, Anna, can you answer that last question for us? Thank you.
Absolutely. And, I have to jump in here because my field director was one of the students that was integral to the passing of, Vote 16. So if I don't say yes, I think Samelia will be really upset with me. So absolutely, I support this. And look, Our youth have led some of our most important social movements throughout history in this country, from racial justice to reproductive rights. Absolutely, they should have a voice. Absolutely, they should not be tokenized. And, there are some practical things that we need to figure out. I know that Oakland passed a similar measure recently, and it's up to, us to work closely, as advocates, as, Laura said, as advocates to work closely with cities like Oakland and really advocate at the county level to make sure that this is something we can implement, right? And support the students. And I think, Berkeley High students cannot be tokenized and should not be tokenized. If they're going to host their own candidate forum for their youth in government group, right? Like, these are students that have a voice, have an important voice, are active in leading racial justice movements right now, and we should respect them and honor them and support them with Vote 16. So I support it.
Thank you, Anna. And again, apologies for that. Jose is going to start our next question, but I wanted to remind the audience that if you have additional questions, you can type them into the Q&A. The icon should be at the bottom of your screen, unless you're on an iPad here. So my next question here is that Berkeley High is trying to use restorative justice practices around issues of sexual harassment and harm. How will you balance the right of the accused with the rights of the victims of sexual harassment and assault? What is the school board's role in crafting and enforcing a policy around these issues?
That's a really good question. It's a really difficult question. I think that I like the idea. I enjoy the idea of restorative justice. I think it's something that has to happen in our society. I think that we need to come to terms with the fact that we are, commodify. I have two daughters, and I think that we tend to commodify women and women's bodies. I think that's wrong, and I think that's something that we've been doing here. There are certain lines that we need to push forward. So there are things that we're going to be able to address and have restorative change and bring the community in to actually be the change that we want the kids to be. There are certain things that they do that are wrong and maybe not the most optimal thing. But there are things that I think will pass a certain line, and that's where we as the board members will have to come in and say, well, maybe these things should be referred to, policing or something of that sort. So that's where I stand.
Thank you, Mike.
Hi, thank you. Of the board members, I'm the only one who has direct subject matter expertise in this area, as I am a federal attorney with direct jurisdiction over these issues. The sex harassment concerns in the district are a priority for my campaign, and if I'm on the school board, I prioritize the issue. I know the district is working to bring itself into compliance. There are a number of issues that observing the responsiveness of the district have raised concerns for myself, but procedures and policies that are associated with restorative justice and a robust restorative justice program, including the appropriate staffing of Title IX coordinators, investigators, and training on both sex harassment and climates on campus, as intersectional with other factors, race, and also disability access. These are co-equal in relevance and importance, and under the law, they also require compliance. So this is a systems issue that I have experience in and will prioritize and assist the district with putting in place. Thank you, sorry about that.
Yeah. Laura?
I would agree with Mike Chang, and also say that restorative justice, when working well, it does just that. It does balance the needs of the victim and the needs of the person who has been accused. And so what we need to do is to really look at our restorative justice practices and procedures and make sure that we are actually aligning them with the true nature of restorative justice, which is something that does come out of my culture. And it's something that I fought to get into our district. We've been working very diligently on the sexual harassment policies. I've helped to write them. And we need to listen to our students. We need to listen to the educational programs that they are saying that they want implemented, make sure that we empower them to be the leaders, to be the educators for their peers, and support them through this hostile environment. My child was at Berkeley High. I know it's real. We had to go through it ourselves. And so I'm determined to make sure that another generation of high schoolers won't face what we faced. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Anna? Oh, Norma, I'm so sorry. Norma.
I keep to do that. No way can a teacher teach to each child. Why am I muted still?
No, you're not.
No way can a teacher teach to each child's willingness, nor to their ability, nor to their interests, all of which change or stay the same over time, from day to day, hour to hour, or not at all, depending. Same as for you and me. Not if they have 20 children or 5 or even just the 1 or 2. And children are not asked. They are put through something called free compulsory education, as defined by a 13-year-old school child. This education needs also deny that students, other learning, customs, experiences are not education. What they came from in the background is dismissed in order to fit into the school's curricula. It insists that school is the source of learning, and this is through the grades.
Thank you. Anna?
I'm also going to agree with a lot of what Mike said, but politely disagree because I'm also a subject matter on this. I implement a restorative program in San Francisco called the Muni Transit Assistance Program, where we remove SROs from buses and make sure that we de-escalate conflict on the buses through restorative means. I will say that it's really important that we get a Title IX coordinator for Berkeley High, that we think of consent education more holistically from the elementary school level all the way up until the high school. I think that's really important. And, you know, it's a school board's job to listen to all sides of this story, right? And then take a position. But I think, you know, restorative justice is key as part of the solution. And working with providers like Shalom Babitt, which was a provider that was recommended to the district right before the pandemic, we were in conversations with them about what consent education would look like district-wide from K to 12. And Judy Appel, our board president, was really involved in moving that forward. So I think, you know, continuing the great work that Judy has done and making sure that we're responsive to the Title IX needs at the high school.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Yes, school safety is utmost important in my campaign, and which includes restorative justice. And unfortunately, it hasn't been administered and processed properly in the past few years. And I say it from firsthand experience. So, and it shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be left upon a principal of the year or the superintendent of the year. It should be a systematic approach that with proper training for teachers, for administrators, for all the stakeholders. How can a student perform well if they don't feel safe in school? And you know, these are all issues that related, and the safety or whether it's a sexual harassment or abuses, they are not just, they pop up by themselves. They have root cause, and we have to address those properly. Thank you.
Thank you. For this question, we will start with Mike. And our question is, what are your thoughts about achievement gaps within BUSD, and what will you do to address them?
Thank you. The achievement gap is an important issue that is of high concern for me and is a priority for my campaign as well. I also have direct federal legal experience in this area. I've put in place resolutions and remedies at large districts across California and other parts of the country. An African-American student is 6.1 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than a white student in Berkeley Unified. And a white student is 1.7 times more likely to take an AP class than an African-American student in the district. This is an example of the opportunity gap. There are ways to address this through a strong restorative justice program that's grounded in positive behavioral interventions and other forms of practices that reduce escalation and de-escalate responses to student conduct, but also testing and assessment are important. All of these systems that are put in place at the district level and through robust staffing will support these outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, I can. What are your thoughts about achievement gaps within BUSD, and what will you do to address them?
Awesome. Thank you for that question. When I first learned of the opportunity or achievement gap in Berkeley schools, I felt the call to action and I responded. This is why I've dedicated most of my life over the last 10 years to make sure that we did have many of the programs and services that we do have in place to address the opportunity or equity gap. But what I've seen through the oversight committees is that we have not implemented any of them with the fidelity or the level of accountability that we need. BUSD has an equity rubric, but it has not been implemented. We have lots of wonderful words on paper. None of those words have been implemented effectively. And so I look forward to implementing accountability structures to make sure that what we say, we do, what we would want, we achieve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, yes. Norma?
Yeah, you know, you don't have to keep muting me. There's nothing going on in the background here. So I've long wondered, things are saying that Black people are having a lot of trouble with school. Maybe it's because school does the wrong thing. Nobody's looking at seeing what is wrong with school that it operates the way it does. One of the things that school does is it tells somebody they failed. They failed. That is so out of the church. It is so cruel and judgmental. It does. People, if they do something wrong, they should be able to see, oh, I didn't get that right, or oh, honey, you didn't do that. Let's fix that. Let's not have a failed grade for the person. School insists the source of learning, of education, is made into a package we're forced to buy into.
Thank you, Norma. Anna?
Yes, you know, we have a 2020 vision in place, which is our district-wide framework to close the opportunity gap. And guess what? It's 2020. We haven't closed it. The same students that were falling behind when this was drafted are still falling behind, are African-American learners, Latinx students, students with disabilities. What this tells me, and what I know from talking, you know, to everyone who has been implementing the 2020 vision, is that we have pilot interventions and very weak evaluation. As someone with direct experience overseeing evaluation programs at a district-wide level, I oversee the evaluation for Safe Routes to School at 103 public schools in San Francisco. I can tell you that our evaluation for the 2020 vision is awful. We need a new iteration of this. We need to be held accountable as a district for our pilot interventions for all these, our vulnerable students. That's really, really important. And, you know, I think that we need to address the fact that the opportunity gap starts before kindergarten. We need things like, you know, a TK program for all 4-year-olds. We need to make sure that when our kids enter kindergarten, they're on the same playing field, and they're not. And so there's a lot that we can do to close the opportunity gap.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Also, I agree this achievement gap doesn't start in high school or middle school. It starts from the day they're born. No person is equal. You have to look at the context of where the family is, the background, the ethnicity, all that, and don't treat every child the same. I struggled myself with mathematics in middle school. It was only a teacher who helped me out, and I excelled, and I later on graduated in applied math in Berkeley. So if I can do that, if anybody can do that. So I truly believe every student, no matter what, if they're given proper resources, time and attention, they can achieve their highest potential. And this charts and graphs are not doing any justice to any student. You have to really look at this from day one, from root cause, and not just being reactive. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose?
As I said in the beginning of my introductory speech, this is a systematic issue. It's a systematic failure. And we keep putting up people who are the same as the school board. So from my perspective, I have a 3-point plan: equity, academic excellence, and accountability. From an equity perspective, it's not just about having the same level of spending. It's not that. Some people are going to need more help. That's it. We need to actually invest in those people. So from an equity perspective, again, we want to provide a plan, put together a plan, learn from what other people are doing around the country. From academic excellence, building a promised neighborhood where you bring to bear all of the government's resources from a county level, a city level, bring in the nonprofits, bring in some of the foundations and private money. Yes, private money. And lastly, accountability. We have not held ourselves accountable as a community. We have not held the USD accountable, and it's a scandal. We need to change that. Someone like an outsider like myself can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question begins with Laura. Laura, do you believe that it is important to recruit Black, Indigenous people of color as teachers? If so, why?
Oh, I definitely believe in that. In fact, I am personally responsible for at least 3 African-American teachers that we have in our district right now. One, I am proud, has become the chair of our African-American Studies Department. Berkeley High is still the only school in the nation with an African-American Studies Department. And the studies show that it's extremely important for students, not just Black and brown students, but for all students to have the exposure of teachers of color. They are more likely, if they've had one, at least by 3rd grade, to go to college, and even higher percentages if they've had 2 by 5th grade. And so we held our principal accountable because the principals are responsible for the hiring. We took the resumes directly to our principal when we found out that we had teachers of the year who weren't making it through our human resources department. So our advocacy efforts have all been around driving home the need to close the opportunity gap. And that is a major equity strategy to reach that goal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Norma? Norma, you're muted.
Right. Reading, writing, and arithmetic and music and history and gym all can be taught by fixing the porch steps together, playing the piano together, running around and playing with friends, and going and doing something else. The idea of segregating us all into grade classrooms fits the idea of segregating clumps of knowledge. Geography, history, math, arithmetic, gym, recess, segregating these from each other so that they can be tested, so that they can give teachers a commodity to teach and a job. Tell how to answer questions on a test instead of live together, enjoy it, develop it as we go along. We have no structure to allow what I've just been describing. The so-called subjects actually include each other. The structure instead is the school building. It's an austere building. The separation so that a parent can't just walk in and talk with their child. It's the opposite of friendly and loving.
Thank you, Norma. Anna?
Can you repeat the question, Adina?
Yes, I can. Do you believe that it is important to recruit Black, Indigenous people of color as teachers? If so, why?
120%, it absolutely is, and it's critical. I mean, on a national level, less than 3% of our teachers are Black or brown male instructors. So, let's absorb that. That's less than 3%. That's awful. So as part of my work on Safe Routes to School in San Francisco, I work with a nonprofit called Urban Ed Academy that works with historically Black colleges and universities to recruit teachers of color, Black male teachers, to work with schools in San Francisco to make sure that students of color have a role model, right? I think that, we're really lucky in Berkeley because our Berkeley Federation of Teachers has a Teachers of Color network. And I've talked to Lucero Lupercio, one of the teachers that's part of this network, to say, how can we support you, right? It's not only recruiting the teachers, it's also supporting them while they're in the district, right? We need to make sure that we're recruiting them early, like other districts are doing, like San Francisco is doing, recruiting them early, supporting them while they're going through a pipeline, right? While they're going through their credentials, and making sure that we're protecting them from micro and macro aggressions at school campuses. So I think we need to recruit and we need to better support teachers of color.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Thanks. Yes, I also support 100%, or maybe more, 125%. I know. But definitely, this is to close, as Laura mentioned, close the opportunity gap. It's far long overdue. And to do this, you have to do it in a respectful way and the way that they are appreciated and compensated properly. And we all have heard different statistics, and you hear this huge population in our society, and they're underrepresented definitely in school, and that not serving our students of any color, to show just one type of representation only, or majority. So it would be helpful to have that in our school system. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose?
Given the statistics that I mentioned earlier, and given that we're talking about all the social unrest in our country, I'm not sure why it's a question, but yes, absolutely, I would support this. Let me give you a little bit more example. 4th grade, Mr. Vasquez. 8th grade, Mr. Garcia. 10th grade, Mr. Liu. These are the teachers. These are the people who actually made it possible for me to, be where I am. And if it weren't for them, then I just wouldn't have been here. I would have been somewhere else. I would have been a statistic on some police report. But it's the importance of having that contact, having somebody like yourself who is able to, give you a hand up, help you, and just take care of you a little bit more than maybe somebody else would. Not that other teachers can't, but I think that they have vested interest in some ways. So I would really support this. I think it's a no-brainer.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Equity is, of course, not just about diversity, but it's about inclusion. As the recent Diversity and Inclusion National Co-Chair of my federal agency, I worked closely with upper-level leaders and also with local managers and staff. This type of thing with regard to pipelines and providing an appropriate set of mentors and mentees as they move up through the ranks, but also with regard to recruitment and retention are absolutely critical to increasing the diversity, but also providing inclusive environments. In terms of the educational context, having a familiar face is very, very important to comfort and also competence and achievement and relatability. I know that for myself, when I was a kid, I never had an Asian American teacher. And when we came out here to Berkeley, my kids were like, Miss Kim and Miss Lee. And I was quite amazed. And I told them, this is really incredible for you. And it was, it's a very important aspect of a progressive Berkeley future. And having African American and Indigenous faculty are at the top of priority for me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. For our next question, Norma will be starting us off. And the question is, how will you balance the safety of teachers, staff, and students with the needs of families and students for in-person school?
Yeah, I'm back again to talking about the real stuff. I am a deep communist. I affiliate with Peace and Freedom Party, which is on the ballot, and it's called the Socialist, working for a socialist structure to change what's going on in our world and in all our experiences. What I support here is that people begin to arrange that we live integrated instead of the segregated ways we live now. Putting a Black person into teaching or any identity affiliated person, they have to join the system, the status quo. So I don't see it as an advantage per se. It's like saying elect a woman, elect a Black or Asian or whatever person. It's not the cure. People have to join the system that stands.
Thank you, Norma. Anna?
Can you repeat the question again, Adina? I think I get it. It's about, coming in-person learning, but.
Sure, yeah, I'll read it again. How will you balance the safety of teachers, staff, and students with the needs of families and students for in-person school?
Absolutely. So, I'm as the only person here who has experience working on COVID response professionally. I'm involved in these conversations with SFUSD. I think balance is key. Making sure you have strong city and school district partnerships. That's why I like what cities like San Francisco have done that have said, look, we hear the needs of essential workers and that parents are having a hard time, and we are providing, right, a childcare option through the Community Hubs initiative. That's important for your most vulnerable families, right? That helps them breathe a little bit. But I think it's really important before we open schools that we listen to the science, that we are talking to our teachers union, that we are talking to all bargaining units, right? To understand the needs of our education workers, because they have families too, and they have valid health concerns. And most importantly, that we're working with our Department of Public Health. That's the most important thing. And right now, the conditions are not there for in-person learning. But there are opportunities for affordable childcare. And I think that's where we need to leverage our city partnerships to make sure that we're responsive for the parents that need this the most.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Yes, thanks. I also agree that this is a science matter. This is an issue that I would rely totally on data and the health experts to guide us through this. Having said that, I'm totally appreciative of the issues, the parents that at hand, but I believe the safety of teachers and students are at utmost importance during this public health crisis. And we have to follow whatever the health experts and directives are guiding us through this. And that I will stay by that. Thanks.
Thank you. Jose?
According to our illustrious leader, Mr. Trump, not many people are actually getting sick. It's a small percentage. It just happens to be that people of color are the majority of that percentage. And so some of the academic gap that we're trying to bridge is also the same people. This is a science-based issue. This is a public health issue. And we have to follow the real, if you want to use that word, public health experts rather than politicians. I support what Superintendent Stevens has done, which has actually said, you know what, this is a very hard decision. We're not ready. We're not ready because we live in a county that it has not proven itself. As we live in a city that may be better off from a COVID perspective, but still we can't afford all the countermeasures, all the systems that need to be put in place in order for our children to come back a safe environment and our teachers to come back in a safe environment. We're just not there. We're not at a point where we can afford all the cleaning, all the ventilation systems, all those kinds of things. So sorry, out of time.
No worries, thank you. Mike?
Hi, thank you. The science has to lead here. As an active member of the American Federal Government of Employees, I participated in our COVID-19 response, and in terms of labor, it's very important to respect the health of all parties, but employees in particular have a concern about the science as well around the issue of virus transmission. And right now, the science indicates that it's not safe to go back. I would hate to send back an employee, a teacher, who would then get sick and then it to be due because of we shot the gun too early, and then we would have to then turn around and change our plans. So this is a matter of equity as well. Of course, it's something that we have to look at very carefully. There are different ways to manage this. As a teacher myself, we shifted to online learning very rapidly in the middle of the semester in March, and this was very difficult for the post-secondary students that I teach. And for my own self, for my children, I know that it's hard as well. Some of us are able to access this better, but there are different ways to manage the disparities that can be done without exposing people to the virus. Sorry, thank you.
Thanks. Laura?
So I'd just like to add that to respectfully disagree with you, Anna, but other people have also opened offices around the world, actually. I've opened offices around the world that are COVID safe, following all the necessary guidelines and following the science. So we can follow the science. And when you look at the question says, how will we balance the needs for our staff and our students? We have the same needs. We have the same need to return to school safely. And so as school board directors, we need to be pushing our district along in meeting those needs, in meeting those guidelines. We have other school districts running circles around us right now with their ed hemps and their ed camps already in place. Where are ours? Our students need it, especially our earliest learners. And we can do it. We have the funds, we have the resources. We just need the project management and the implementation of a strong leader like myself to make sure it gets done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And for question number 7, we're going to start with Anna. When budgets need to be cut, what will you look to first and how will you prioritize?
I think I will look towards evaluation. I mean, as someone who is, a government employee who oversees evaluation, I'm used to making decisions where you have limited resources and you have to prioritize, right? So I've been in these shoes. I understand what's at stake, right? And I think it's really important that you see what's working because we have scarce resources and what's not. And I think that's how I'm going to prioritize. I'm also going to speak to the people that are impacted the most by those decisions, right? So I think before making any decisions, it's really important that as school board directors, right, that we're talking to all the people that would be impacted the most by that decision and hearing all sides. I think that's, it's through authentic engagement and making sure that you're making data-driven decisions that you can really reach a balanced budget. And I have experience doing that. Currently, I oversee a $2.8 million budget for safe routes to school in the transportation sector. And these are decisions that I have to make as part of my day job all the time. And I report to electeds, but the way that we decide on what to fund is to see, what works and what has not been working, and having the data to make those decisions.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Thanks. I also have extensive experience in several $100 million projects which involved budgeting. So to me, again, I would be using data, not rely on who shouts the loudest at the table or which wheel is squeaking to attention. So it would be, my decision would be data driven. And of course, issues and projects and mitigations have a different category. Some are safety related. So definitely risk is a very high component. Some of them are reliability related, business continuity related, environmental related. So they can be ranked and evaluated accordingly. And again, building alliances and listening to stakeholders is the key, my inclusiveness approach that I take in budgeting and negotiation in running projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose?
I mentioned earlier two approaches, right? Systematic approach to doing things in a stakeholder model. In dealing with budgeting issues, you always have to take a systematic approach. What is going to be the programs that deliver the most? What programs can be, maybe deleted or cut? And, if that is something that we as a community decide as stakeholders, at the table, decide that it's important to us, then how are we going to go and find that money? Because at the end of the day, we want to have a lot of programs and a lot of issues, but, we also have some, dollars and cents to actually make, make sense in the whole system as well. So I would certainly bring everybody together and say, look, folks, these are our choices. And, my choice would be to cut this, but I want to hear from everybody as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. In the federal agency where I work, I was on the steering committee of a National Employee Engagement Committee, where we worked on budgeting issues with regard to staffing and other policies and programs in the agency. I would approach the issue with regard to budget cuts from a compliance perspective, but with the principle of equity and quality. Equity and quality can be maintained. There are going to be difficult choices. However, as long as you follow a principle and you ensure compliance, which are based upon regulatory laws that are based upon good metrics-based data and also regulatory input from Congress and otherwise, these are factors that, if they're followed carefully and also with listening to stakeholders in our community, we can come out on the other side with ensuring equity as well as quality in the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure, yes. The question is, when budgets need to be cut, what will you look to first? How will you prioritize?
Thank you so much. So we always use data to drive our results. And so the first thing I want to do is provide outcome-oriented budgeting, which means we use the results of our data to decide what we need. So if we're saying our problem is around our African-American student achievement, then we won't use our money to cut that need, right? So we're just going to relate the need with the funding of our students and our families. And we also need to be very practical in Berkeley. We need to look at our administrative offices. We need to look at our back offices. We need to look at where we can create efficiencies to reduce our expenses and to save our costs. And then we can reinvest our money and to also, as school board directors, advocate at the state level so that more money comes in. And so that we hold people accountable for fully funding public education. There are practical ways in which we can improve the results of our budgeting process right now, cut red tape, making sure that everyone is clear, budget owners get budget versus actual reports, and all of the things that I do on a daily basis around the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Norma? Norma, you're muted.
What I want to do is to give people the chance, maybe the obligation, socially or alone, to take an honest look at the social structure, to determine among each other how it's done, what it is that has happened to them. People go around, I say to people, we hate school. And of course, there are people who say, yeah. But then there are others who say, no, I loved school. And to them, I offer that this is, God, what kind of emotional amnesia, selective amnesia. It's hard to remember the agonies that we went through having to go to school, having to be a child, having to be in a wholly other relationship to society from our parents. It's not been, we wonder why it's so different, excluding us over a standard of behavior that was difficult to grasp. Oh, I have to submit to this.
Thank you, Norma. So for our next question, I would like to talk about special education. We received many special education questions. However, I'm going to start with this one. The question is from someone in the audience. One of my students has an IEP, which I believe is Individualized Education Plan. I have seen how the various specialists struggle with their caseloads. How will you fight to increase funding to support students with learning differences? And the question begins with Esfandiar.
Thank you. And this is a very delicate subject matter. I definitely rely on, technology. We are, I was reading an article right here in UC Berkeley. The School of Education and School of Information have come up with this models that they can tailor for students' performance, strength, and weaknesses, and use it to help students. I mean, we are so fortunate that we are in a city that homes to one of the top universities in the world. There are resources that we can touch, but also support the teachers, support the resources that needed to bring that kind of help to the special need student. I will do my best to provide that thing if I'm in the school board.
Thank you. Jose?
Yeah, I'm going to share a little bit of a painful story. I think for me, our son had to, fight for a 504, classification, started his junior year. It was extremely difficult to get any cooperation from either the staff or from the district in order to do this. We went so far as to basically fund it ourselves and force it, and making sure that it actually happened. That's not what's supposed to happen. That's not the way that things are supposed to be run. And that's not the thing that I would support. What I would support is basically upgrading this current system. We have to do it because otherwise it's not equality. We've talked about equity a lot. We've talked about it, in this forum, but, we actually have to fund it. And so those were the kind of priorities, whether it be budgeting, whether it be anything else that we have to support, period, end of story. So for me, it's something that I would definitely support and bring forward to the foreground.
Thank you. Mike?
This is also an area that amongst the board candidates I have specific subject matter expertise in. As a federal government attorney, I actually enforce jurisdiction in this area, and I work with a lot of schools regarding disability access. This is an equity issue and equality issue. In particular, with students with disabilities with IEPs and 504s, there are a set of complicated laws and technicalities that must be followed for compliance. And the compliance regulations are structured in the manner to ensure equity and equality. I would like to see the district shift away, this is an area of concern to me, shift away from overuse of litigation and to focus on staffing. That's what I would advocate for on the school board and prioritize. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
So the question was, how would we increase funding for special education? And we could actually increase our funding by just doing it right, by stopping the lawsuits that are constantly bombarding Berkeley Unified School District and taking those funds and actually doing special education correctly. I spent over a year working with parents of children of African descent, as well as our allies, really looking into all of the detailed problems with special education in Berkeley Unified. We developed an entire proposal. That was 5 years ago. None of those recommendations have been put in place. And so I'm looking forward to picking that up and moving those changes forward. One of them is just basic professional development for our instructional assistants, for our teachers, so that they really understand what students' disabilities are and how do they work to help them overcome them in a general education classroom. So there's lots of practical things we can do, once again, that I'm looking forward to implementing as your next school board director.
Thank you. Norma? Norma, you're muted.
What's necessary to have been said has been said very well. School is, if the children, the contradictions that school is for children, watching a child be failed makes even a child who succeeds worry about their own position. And I know some of them are supposed to feel, oh, great, I'm great, I don't have these problems. But they're back there, they're worried about whether or not they will continue to or come up to meeting the standards they're supposed to. They're worried about things all the time. Talk about kids as kids, like the happy-go-lucky, kick up their heels creature, but they're not that. They're just people like us. Reform is another problem that people have to look at. It's not reform, it's continuation of the same thing under another guise.
Thank you. Anna?
Hi, I agree with a lot of the things that the previous candidates have said, and like Jose Luis, I have a very personal story too, and so I appreciate you sharing your narrative, Jose Luis. My youngest son has an IEP, and I've gone through this process myself as a parent. It can be very intimidating, and I know that it's very important that we better resource our special education department, particularly at the preschool level. Like, I've talked to our principal, Maria Carriedo, and I've asked her, it's like, why is the achievement gap pronounced in kindergarten? And she said, we don't have enough response to intervention at the preschool level, and we really need it. So I think it's very important that we start early with special education and that we better resource at the lower grades, right? Like, that's really important so that we're appropriately supporting parents. And, it is a struggle. I think, yes, de-escalating conflict is important, but also helping parents go through the IEP process, right? Like, I've been a proponent of culturally responsive IEPs with our Office of Family Engagement and Equity to make sure that this IEP process is a lot more culturally responsive than it is right now.
Thank you. We'll have time for about 3 more questions, just to give you all heads up before we will go into the closing statements. I'd like to continue with another question related to special education, but I think also sort of general in its way. So the question is, and by the way, we will start with Jose. The question is, what is your plan to enable the district to retain key staff in important functions such as special education, student services, and Title IX compliance?
That's actually a really good question. It's, look, I've managed lots of companies and lots of organizations at different levels. So I think what it comes down to is that, you treat people right, you give them professional opportunities to grow, and you pay them well. It's a very simple formula, but it's actually really difficult to implement. There are a lot of things in the background for these folks that may be a little bit different for each one individually. But if you follow those 3 tenets, again, pay them well, treat them well, and, the results will follow. I think that's nothing more they need to do. Yes, of course, we need to invest in them. As we invest in them, they will invest in us back. I'll see you right time, because for me, this is a very simple issue.
Thank you. Mike?
Oops, thank you. As a steering member of a National Employee Engagement Advisory Committee at my federal agency, we worked on these issues of recruitment and retention. Recruitment and retention are a critical aspect to maintaining the health of any institution. And in particular, with regard to schools, we need not only full public funding for public school, which requires advocacy on the school board and working with the city council and the mayor and with the governor's office. But also, we need to put in place innovative practices to keep our teachers, such as a housing trust in the school district following the model of the post-secondary sector, providing affordable owned housing. These are recruitment and retention practices that are not uncommon across education, and some school districts are following this model, particularly in very expensive, high-price areas such as the Bay Area. And we've seen many of our teachers leave, my children and myself, and this is a very important priority for myself on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Laura? Oops, Laura, you're muted.
Thank you so much. As a part of the local control and accountability plan that I helped to write for Berkeley Unified School District, we made sure that we put in a position called the recruitment and retention of teachers of color. And what I found is whenever you've done something that's supposed to help one group, it eventually helps all groups. And so this position really creates an environment to really look at what are the issues that our teachers are facing, and then how do we study those and how do we rectify them. So for example, we've learned that we must make sure that we increase our educator pay, that we must create a welcoming school environment, not just for our students, but also for our teachers and our other educators and staff. And so those are the things that I look forward to continuing on to build on as the school board director, and to make sure that we have the right pathways to the professional development training that our educators need, and many of the additional resources like getting to parking, for example. That is such an issue if you were a teacher at Berkeley High School. So very, again, practical solutions to our problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Norma? Norma, you're muted.
So children, they suffer through the early grades, having cried at being left by their dear people. They get a kindergarten diploma and later an elementary school diploma and a high school diploma and a college or university degree of one or another level, and fit themselves into some 8-hour-a-day stifle because they have that scroll. And then they spend short or long periods doing these jobs. My brother got a master's degree in parasitology, a master's in world health, a doctoral in world health, and ended up his last couple of decades of work selling AAA insurance, and grateful to have that. A child was his boss and frightened my brother throughout my brother's time there.
Thank you, Norma. Anna?
Hi, Adina. I just want, again, echo a lot of the things that the other candidates have said. And I would say, one of the reasons why I got so involved with our campaign measures, EG&H, was because we desperately needed to improve compensation for our teachers. Out of the local districts, we were one of the ones that was paying the lowest. And so I was very happy to work alongside the Berkeley Federation of Teachers and fight for a 7% raise for our education workers, but that's clearly not enough. I think for the positions that you mentioned, Adina, it's very important to understand what the caseloads are, to look at exit interviews and understand why those positions have so much turnover, right? And, to do a staff survey, to work really closely with our union partners, because not all of the positions that you mentioned are represented by the Berkeley Federation of Teachers. Some of them are represented by other unions, but to do a survey with the unions and understand what is impacting retention for these positions, right? Because when we lose that institutional knowledge, all our students suffer, right? So this is something that we need to invest in more carefully. And again, I don't think those campaign measures were enough to retain our staff.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Yes, thanks. Unfortunately, this is a day-to-day fact of life in the education system, but which is very unfortunate. It's so sad that the narrative is talking about cutting key positions in the school system, whereas in a functioning and well-balanced society, teachers should be paid and compensated, appreciated at the highest level. And one of the things I would be doing if I'm elected in the school board, I want to change that narrative. And I'm willing to fight to even higher level. I've gone, even when I wasn't in a committee, I went and fought for an outdated school framework all the way to California Board of Education. I'm definitely willing to fight for better rights, better compensation, better appreciation for schools, especially for key positions. And the teachers are one of the most integral part of our society. Thank you.
Thank you, yes. And for our next question, we're going to begin with Mike. And our question is, how will you maintain or grow the two-way immersion program in BUSD? According to the questioner, it has not consistently been optimized yet, sets up students to be global citizens.
Thank you. If I'm understanding that question correctly, it's referring to the dual language immersion program, if that's correct. This is a very important program in the district. I'd like to ensure that students have access to this, not only because from an English language learner perspective, access to bilingual education is actually quite important for cultural reasons and otherwise, but also just in a pragmatic sense. Longfellow, for example, functions as a magnet school for the district with the additional provision of bilingual education, which is so important to global citizens, as the questioner asked. In terms of prioritizing this, I think the focus with working with the superintendent and the school board would be that magnet schools of this sort within a public school district are absolutely critical to maintaining property dollars and also maintaining a positive and progressive culture in the city of Berkeley. I'd like to actually see expansions of bilingual education. For my children, I was hoping to have more options rather than less. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Laura?
Thank you so much. I've actually seen the TWI program go through many changes in our district. And one of the benefits that we thought we were getting out of the program by supporting it to be consolidated at Sylvia Mendez as well as to be consolidated at Longfellow Middle School was that the resources would follow. And so our programs have not actually gotten that advantage. And so we need to make sure that we fully fund this program first and foremost if we expect for it to thrive. We need to make sure that our translation services in general throughout our district expand. We only have one district translator. We should have at least 3. And we need to make sure that we listen to the families in this community and that we address their needs. For example, African-American students in this program have a very difficult time. Not only do they have the language barrier, but they have added racial isolation, and they also need additional cultural sensitivity. So we need to implement those services as well, looking at our students and our families. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. Norma? And please unmute.
I think that we have people in our community who could well form together the understandings of our actual situation instead of our diluted observance. Form together the other social formations in which we can live meaningful lives from the time we're 2 through the time we're 102 or more. Age segregation is antithetical to worthy or enjoyable living. It is essential to the profit system, capitalism. We need to set up alternative living that feels good for all of us to do. This requires working to end profits. And it requires us recognizing, as I've said, failure is a wrong idea for people to have. We cannot look at people and say, you failed. I mean, or anything close, you get a D in the grade. You perform poorly.
Thank you, Norma. Anna?
Hi, Dina. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Great. You know, this isn't a topic that I've talked to Beatriz Leiva Cutler at length about, and she's our Latina board member right now. And I think it's really important that we update our English language master plan. Like, that's really important. We need to create a pathway for Latino students who did not start at the kindergarten level to be able to access the to be able to access the bilingual education program. It is not right that Latino students who did not start in kindergarten cannot access this program, and that needs to be fixed ASAP. We need to make sure that we're maintaining the 50-50 ratio for this program. A lot of our Latinx and Black families are moving out of Berkeley because of gentrification. We need to create pathways for affordability and work closer with the city to make sure that we can retain these families and allow for flexibility in inter-district transfers. That's very important if we are to maintain the goals of this program. Lastly, I want to make sure that we're being culturally responsive. Learning the language is not enough. This is about learning ethnic studies. This is about learning history. This is about learning cultura. And we need to work harder to make sure these parts are honored as part of an updated master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Yeah, all my 3 daughters went through dual immersion Spanish from kindergarten. So I have a first-hand experience how valuable and beneficial this program has been. And like Anna mentioned, it's not just that they are fluent in Spanish now, they're fluent in Farsi and English, but it's not just the language, it's the cultural sensitivity that they gain. And that's so enormous. So I recall actually 20 years ago, when my oldest daughter was in early years and school was thinking about cutting some of this program, I went with a bunch of teachers and students and fought for it. And I will fight for it to expand on this program, not just cut it. We need to expand on this, not just Spanish, like Mike mentioned. We need to expand on other options too. So I'm definitely for this program. I will definitely fight for this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose?
Despite our president's best efforts, we still live in a global community. We still have relationships with everyone in the world. I've been lucky enough to travel the world. People in Europe, people in Asia. Of course, 2 languages minimum, 3 is better, 4 is optimal. Only in the space is this, do we have this mentality that, you can only learn 1 language. It's not true. I have the fortunate experience of having my daughter go through Longfellow, through the 2-way immersion in Berkeley from kinder all the way through high school. She's doing great. But let me tell you a little bit about the transition. The transition was a disaster. What did they try to transition from? Well, lack of support to teachers, every teacher having to do their own lesson plan, no language provisions whatsoever. And then when they consolidated it, none of the resources came, only the problems. And so with that, that's a recipe for disaster. Again, I blame management. This is a management issue. These are things that can be resolved with people on the board who are outsiders.
Thank you. Now this next question will be our final question for the evening, and we will be starting with Laura. According to the questioner, the current superintendent and board are at an impasse with our classified unions, making it so our classified staff are all being paid but don't have to report to work. How would you navigate this if you were on the board? How would you advise the superintendent?
Well, I would have to first question the facts or the data, because I do know several classified staff who are actually working and showing up for work. But when we talk about contract negotiations, the needs of our staff would be first and foremost, the needs of our students would be first and foremost, and then how do we bring those needs together so that we can get the projected outcome? One of the things that I've done is, in my work, is always made sure that we look for our common ground. And once we find our common ground and we work together, crossing the aisle, so to speak, to make sure that we develop plans that we both can agree to, both that reach our shared goals, we can do it, we can achieve it. So that's why my campaign slogan is leadership for changing times, because even as I advocate, I inspire and I bring people together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Norma? Norma, make sure that you unmute.
I just made a note to myself to tell people I've been reading a book with a group called Strike Debt called The Deficit Myth. And in it, the author is explaining, and other people have explained this, there is no shortage of money except as how our Congress decides. Our Congress can decide, and I guess the great example is they decided for the war in World War II, a war which, by the way, was started with the support of the capitalists that were based in America, but it's hard to track that. You can ask me that question of how it happened if you don't get it. In any event, there's not enough money if it's just authorized by the people that we elect to provide it, to click the button on the computer and say, give this thing enough money.
Thank you, Norma. Anna?
Hi, Adina. I would love, this is the first time that I'm hearing that, so I would love to learn more about this issue. But I think, assuming it's true, what I would say is that it's very important that we look at students that are underserved right now, right? And we've talked about in this discussion students with disabilities and seeing how our classified staff could better support students with disabilities during this time. Again, I think, when you're talking about decisions that have to do with employment, it's really important that we're talking to and negotiating with our BCCE, with our Union for Classified Staff, right, to better understand what their needs are, and to speak to all the bargaining units to see where are the opportunities. Where do we see that there's a gap in service to students right now, and how can we fill that gap? So I think, that's how I would solve this problem. And I know that there are gaps because there are families that are saying we need more help, especially families with disabilities right now.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Yeah, professionally, I've held numerous meetings with senior management and different stakeholders where not everyone saw eye to eye. So one of the first kind of ground rules I set in the meetings was like, first of all, positive intent. 2, understanding the context before starting to solve the situation. So I would approach the same here. Like, understand what are the issues, what are the common agreement, what are the commonality, what are common goals, and then try to peel off and build on that. And I definitely, we all agree on results and accountability on all sides. So I would be relying on that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose?
Earlier in the evening, I talked about stakeholders. It's a stakeholder model. So for me, I think I am one of these optimists that believe that everybody wants to do a good job and is proud of their work. I think that in the stakeholder model, what you have is everybody at the table, and everybody understands the rules and regulations that are part of this. Every union contract, let me answer directly, every union contract has rules, has regulations, has a process to deal with these kind of issues. What we need to do is actually be supportive of that and make sure that when we have negotiated contract, that we actually take in the things that we need and we give back the responsibility that people deserve and the process that they deserve and the security that they deserve. I don't think there's malintent, in maybe some people not being there for work, but if there is, or if there's some other issues like COVID right now, perhaps there are things that we can look into. This is unprecedented, but still follow the rules, follow the process so that we can achieve the common outcome.
Thank you. Mike?
Yes, I'd also like to hear a bit more about this, and I've heard some of it, and it is a stakeholder issue. As a government attorney, I've implemented thousands of agreements addressing various stakeholders, working with school boards, as well as MOUs and unions. In terms of access, however, that's a continuing issue under shelter in place. Access and equity and access and quality are all important factors. Students with disabilities in particular are of high concern during a remote access context. I'm a teacher as well, and I have implemented accommodations on the remote access platform. And I just can't imagine for students with disabilities and others who are of need, the difficulties with accessing content. So it is important to hear from all parties, but also to focus on equity and quality. But the virus is still out there. So I think this is a very complicated period that requires a lot of listening to stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. because you all were so succinct, we actually have time for one more question, if that's all right. Is that okay with everyone? I'm seeing head nods. Okay. All right, great. Well, for this final question, this time for real, we are going to start with Norma. And the question is, as the demographics in Berkeley become more affluent, we have been losing more and more of our upper middle class families to private schools. How do we offer a quality educational experience for these families so that we can keep them and their resources in the public school system?
I just wanted to mention the reason I named the deficit myth is because everybody could be paid to stay home. People would have to go out and maybe pick the crops and distribute the food or do the essential jobs would have a whole lot more choice rather than throwing themselves under the bus. I had another point that you reminded me of, but I forget what the rest of it was. Maybe I'll throw it in some other time.
Thank you. Anna?
Thanks, Adina. You know, I think when we lose any family to our schools right now, and I'm hearing this a lot from families that are choosing, you know, alternatives to distance learning, families that have moved abroad from BUSD, I think it's important to just hear people out and say, you know, why are you leaving? What did you not get from our schools? And to understand their perspective. I'm a big proponent of community engagement, and I think, you know, it's really important that when families leave the district that we understand why. Families from all socioeconomic levels, right? Like, why are you leaving? What would have made you stay? What would have made you believe that our schools were serving your child to the, you know, and that your child was going to meet their full potential? Because at the end of the day, that's our goal as school board members. I want to make sure that every child that comes to BUSD is meeting their full potential, regardless of what their background is, right? So I'd want to know why. And then, you know, from there, I'll give you the solution. But I think it's really important that we're serving families, especially right now. A lot of families are choosing not to participate in our distance learning plan. And I want to know why. What could we better do to support you, right? You know, that would be my answer before I, you know, I give you like a point by point on how to retain them.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of, or maybe a lot of marketing issue here or optics. You know, 20 years ago, when we decided to have our daughters go through public school, because my wife had gone through it and I myself had gone through public school, and was good result. And I've tracked that because I have friends who've sent their kids to private school. And ever since, over the past year, I've been a big ambassador of the public Berkeley schools, telling all the good things that are happening and through engagement, my own personal involvement. And the result shows, sure, Berkeley High School, for instance, is one of the biggest high schools in the county, but it sends more number of students to Ivy League or top schools than other schools. So it's not so if you just go by the results, and I indicate that always to my friends. So we have to do a better job in marketing and bringing those parents inside and communicating, educating them better.
Thank you. Jose?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think part of the reason people aren't leaving the district is because in some ways we're not providing a competitive enough product or services. Point blank, you know, we do terribly for ethnic minorities. We don't do so well for whites in general. We're not as competitive as some of the other places. So I think that's what we need to do. So what would I bring to change this book? I would bring something akin to the Promised Neighborhood. Please go, I'm not gonna have enough time to talk about this. Please go to my website, biblioforschoolboard2020.com, where I talk about this. So in the Promised Neighborhood concept, it's basically to bring and to create the school as a center point for all government services. It's a hub, if you will, where you bring social services, you know, food services, all these things. You can also bring things like nonprofit organizations. You can bring foundations, and yeah, you can also bring companies in to bring in money and expertise to bear on the problem. That's something that no well-to-do person is going to be able to compete with. That's something that we can provide our kids if we act collaboratively.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose. Mike?
Yes, thank you. I think retention of all students, regardless of class and race, is dependent upon showing that quality is accessible. Equity and quality are not inseparable. There's often a confusion here, and as a government and compliance attorney in the area of civil rights, putting in place resolutions and remedies on the basis of race, sex, and disability discrimination across hundreds of and thousands of schools across California, there are multiple stakeholders involved. But retention in a time of shelter in place, I think, is going to require open conversations on the school board as a governing board, but also as a sounding board for members of the public to explain what their fears and concerns are for their children's education at this moment in time, and to work from there. But certainly leading with a showing of programs in place for quality as well as equity would be a priority for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
Thank you so much for this question. And I think that affluent families are leaving for the same reasons that many families are leaving. I've been watching African-American families leave our district for years now for different opportunities in different school districts, mainly because their kids are not receiving a quality education. And so when we talk about conversations, that is our main problem. All Berkeley has been doing is having multiple conversations, town halls, thought exchange. Where is the action behind making sure that you're going to actually live up to those conversations and bring results so that all kids actually can get a quality education? Our remote learning plan definitely needs to be strengthened. Our creativity needs to be strengthened. We should be really looking into our outdoor classrooms. We should be really looking into all of the things that our families have been advocating for years, and actually taking the time to now get it done with the project management plan and holding people accountable and putting those structures in place that is needed to create change. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before the candidates give their closing statements, I have a few remarks on behalf of the LWV-BAE. First of all, thank you to the candidates for running for office and for your participation this evening. I also want to thank the audience for engaging in our democracy. For further information about upcoming forums, the candidates, pros and cons, and positions on ballot measures, please visit the League's website, lwvbae.org. or votersedge.org/CA. We invite you to join the League to help us engage voters and defend democracy. We do so much more than voter registration and education. Visit our website and social media accounts at LWVBAE. The deadline to register to vote is October 19th this year. You can register to vote online at the Secretary of State's website, sos.ca.gov. Remember to vote by mail or at the polls by Tuesday, November 3rd. This year, we are encouraging voters to vote as early as possible. Please see our website for more information about voting in this election. And now, the candidates will make closing statements. We will reverse the order that we began with, and each candidate will have a closing statement of 1 minute. We are going to start with Laura.
I'm sorry, Mike. I need to plug my computer in. Can you come back to me? The battery's going to die.
Sure, as long as you don't mind coming later.
I don't mind.
We're going to have Mike go then. And I'm sorry, wait, yeah, I just want to restart the timer. Go ahead, Mike.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for meeting with me today, and thank you for the opportunity. I am a 10 plus half a decade, 15-year government regulations attorney who has implemented thousands of cases to address sex, race, and disability-based complaints and conflicts across various districts in California and in other states. Equity and quality is at the top of my agenda, and I have the systems and procedures understandings to put in place policies and otherwise to bring forth a robust restorative justice system and work with the school board and the superintendent to do so. In addition, I'm a proponent of full funding, as many of us are, for public schools, and I seek to work with the other school board members, other school districts, and the city council and the state, starting with a housing trust to retain and recruit our best teachers. And also, I'm a proponent of ethnic studies as a basis of restorative justice language for our students. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Jose?
Thank you all for bearing with us until almost 8 o'clock. I appreciate that. Look, I am not a politician. I'm an outsider. I'm a parent. And I'm a parent who's not happy with the status quo or all those people associated with the current status quo that got us to where we are, including the current board. I don't have all the answers, but I know that I'm happy to research them, and I'm happy to come back and provide systematic approaches and answers to your questions. I think that at this moment in time, we have a fundamental opportunity to change our educational system in a way that best serves all of Berkeley Unified School District's children, from cradle to career. Right now, we're looking at it in this mishmash of different activities that end up going nowhere. So along with that fundamental cultural change, what I want to bring it forward is the actual concrete actions that are going to get us there, not just talk. I've been very direct this tonight. I hope you guys can see that, and we will vote for me in this fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Esfandiar?
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time and the opportunity. I'm not a politician, and I don't have any political aspiration here. I just have a lot of passion for education because I went through personally with my family and everyone. And I believe with the academic, professional, family, my involvement in the community, I bring the perfect mix and balance to be part of this school board. My philosophy is that I truly believe the issues in our school systems are very much related and reflective of society. You know, how can a student perform well in school when they are not safe? Or if the family are struggling with basic needs? How can teachers bring their best if they are not compensated and appreciated accordingly? I will work hard with my colleagues, with stakeholders, with students, with teachers, with families to engage everyone for better results, for better action, and for better school system. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anna?
Thanks, Adina. As the only candidate with the endorsement of the entire school board and the only candidate with direct experience overseeing COVID-19 response efforts for our schools on a professional level, I'd be honored to serve our schools during this very challenging time. My life experience as a first-generation college graduate and English language learner gives me the unique perspective of navigating the school system as a member of our most vulnerable communities. I understand firsthand the institutional barriers that our most vulnerable families face, and I'm committed to addressing these as a school board member. Lastly, this election is very important. Our only Latinx school board member is not seeking re-election. It's important that we have a school board that represents the rich diversity of our student body, with 21% of our students being Latinx. With the endorsements of Latinos Unidos de Berkeley and many other elected officials and organizations, I'm looking forward to being a bridge between the school district and Berkeley's Latinx community. I hope to have your vote for one of the 2 seats for Berkeley School Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Norma? And Norma, you'll need to unmute.
I know. I'd like to make you all aware, if you're not already, all the jobs are a relation to capital. These are all a slave relationship we have to our owners. So they're not the most desirable direction that we want to go. That's one of the things we don't think about, the selective amnesia. We're not going to think about that. We're not going to think about the fact that education that we all want to do with each other, with our children, we want our children to educate us. The exchange is not ours. It is an owned commodity. And that's very painful for us. We're very unhappy about the idea that we are not having a life where we exchange living ability and desire and taste and details of life. We're not living them together to benefit us all. We don't like that. It hurts us. We are pained by our establishment, by the requirement of our establishment.
Thank you, Norma. Apologies for the dog sounds. Laura? Laura, are you there? I just want to give Laura a minute. Oh, there you go. Okay, Laura, you're still muted, just so you know. Oh, Laura, you're still muted.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yes,
Good?
we can hear you now.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm running for the Berkeley School Board primarily in response to COVID-19. Combining my professional finance and accounting and operations background and hands-on BUSD experience affords me the unique opportunity to help BUSD successfully navigate this unprecedented time as we re-engineer our schools, navigate the financial pressures the impending recession will bring, and strive to overcome the achievement gap. I am convinced that we have the opportunity to boost academic outcomes, social emotional development, and to ensure that every student has an equal chance to succeed. Again, I will create accountability structures so that our programs and services are implemented effectively, provide outcome-oriented budgeting, cut red tape, build collaborative, welcoming school environments, and I will address racism. I am the only candidate with the lived experience at every level from pre-K, middle, elementary, and high of the most disenfranchised group in BUSD. I am the only candidate who has fought for Black and Brown students as I have for the last 10 years, and I will continue to do so by taking my advocacy to the next level and making sure the
I could have gone on for
follows.
another minute or
Thank you so
two.
much.
Laura,
I'm sorry, I can't see the timer right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now I know, folks, that the candidates won't be able to hear you, but I hope that you will please join me in a round of applause for the candidates. Thank you all for attending this evening, and good night.